And Solace, we have activated that now.
Thank you very much.
Okay, Hoffaday Newsrooms, good morning. Thank you for joining us. We are here today to discuss last night's officer-involved shooting. My name is Deputy AG Stephanie Mendiola. I'll be sitting in for Carlino today. We have Attorney General Levin Taitano Camacho, Chief Prosecutor Basil O'Malley, and Chief of Police Stephen Ignacio. I'll turn it over to AG Camacho.
Day. Just to start, I want to recognize that we will try to be as transparent, or we will be as transparent as we can, and provide as much information as we can while not jeopardizing the integrity of the investigation. This incident occurred late yesterday evening, last night, and I'm going to turn it over to Chief Prosecutor Basil O'Malley to go over what we know to date.
Good morning. Last night was the first opportunity for something we had a meeting recently about a memorandum of understanding between the Office of the Attorney General and Guam Police Department, creating an independent investigative team. We're surprised it happened so soon, but although we're still working out some of the, we'll call it bugs of the day-to-day, how things are going to go forward, it worked out very good last night because as people most know by now, the shooting occurred at approximately 6 p.m. By 6:20, the chief had already contacted me, and within 30 minutes, our investigators were activated, and they were on the scene by 7:45. We had 2 investigators on the scene, working with GPD investigators, conducting the investigation at the site. With GPD and Office of the Attorney General investigators working together, we've gathered preliminary information. Our investigators secured from the scene at about 10 p.m. They then went up to Tejan, to GPD headquarters, and secured from there at about midnight last night. We can't give you much details at this time, other than yes, it was an officer-involved shooting. And at this point, we're following the standard procedures for any homicide investigation. The scene was officially processed by GPD because they have the technical skills for that. We're still conducting interviews and follow-up interviews. We will conduct, I have already put in a request for a forensic autopsy of the decedent. We're doing ballistics examination of the firearm. And at this time, all we can say is that there was an officer-involved shooting. The shooting victim did die last night. And what I'm asking from the general public and the news agencies, we know a lot of people have videos and photos, and anyone who might have seen what happened last night, please contact our office. We know there are videos out there. We would like to get those videos and those photos. If you want to email the office, it's info, info @oagguam.org, or call 475-2580, and we will get that information from you. Thank you.
Chief, do you want to add anything?
Yes. So I would like to add that as of yesterday evening, upon notification, I did activate the Guam Police Department's Internal Affairs section, and the officer involved in this fatal shooting has been placed on administrative leave. I did reach out early this morning to Director Ike Paredo from the Guam Customs and Quarantine, and I did again request for the assistance of his internal affairs investigators to work alongside and takes the lead again, like they did with the last shooting in the internal affairs investigation, but working alongside with my internal affairs investigators as we move forward in the administrative investigation.
I don't know if there are any questions. Now would be the time.
Yes, we'll go ahead and start with QAM, Jason Solis, or are you just here for tech?
Yes, ma'am. I'd like to defer to my colleague, Isaiah Uggan, please.
Okay, so next will be Isaiah again.
Good morning. I actually have no questions at the moment.
Okay, thank you, Isaiah. Next, I have apps SPB. Okay, Johnny Rosario.
No questions at the moment.
Thanks, Johnny. Next is PNC Zoom.
In the room too, or is it just me? It's me, right? Pauly Suba of K57. Chief Ignacio, was the officer involved off duty at the time?
Yes, the officer involved was off duty at the time.
And can we share why the off-duty officer took action? What did he see or
Yes,
off duty
so-
as a driving on Marine Corps Drive and noticed something happening and took
Yeah, so-
action?
Yeah, so Polly, those are the details that are part of the both the criminal and administrative investigation. But because we are working with the Attorney General's office with the investigative team, any comments about what led up to or what precipitated the shooting, I'll defer any comment to the AG's office because we're still in the very early stages of this investigation. And so I think any statements that we make at this early on would be premature. But any information coming out as to what led up to the shooting or what caused the shooting to occur, I think it's best if we leave that up to the AG's office. I'm here to just, let you all know and the public that, the officer was placed on administrative leave as is in line with our protocols. And we are doing an administrative investigation as well.
And
Thank you,
Paulie,
Chief.
if I could add to that, so the protocol that we've put in place, and again, this is the first time we put it to paper, probably within the last month or two, for a situation just like this. But the two situations where our IAT would be triggered would be when there's an officer involved shooting, which could include an off-duty officer if they are performing peace officer functions. And we also have a provision where our office would get involved and the IAT would be deployed for a case that involves public interest. So I think we all agree, whether it's an off-duty officer or on-duty officer, the public interest supports having an independent investigation to ensure and to be as transparent as possible. In terms of facts, we are working through interviewing witnesses. We've conducted some, and once we are able to provide more factual information, we'll do it as soon as we can.
Understood. Can I also ask if there were other weapons involved from anybody in the investigation?
I'm sorry.
There's word that there was a machete involved.
Again, Paul, we're working through some of what's out there, and I would just caution anyone from, WhatsApp groups. I see messages floating around, and that's what we're trying to sort through right now to find out what happened. And the request for information, if the people have photos, have videos, it'll help us put it together. Right now, we're gathering information, we're interviewing witnesses, and once we can put out solid information that we can confirm and corroborate, we will advise the media and the general public.
I have a few more. I'll wait to go back around.
Thanks, Polly. Next, Shane Healy. Okay, if nothing from Shane, next is Nick Delgado.
Hi, Hafaday, Attorney General, Hafaday Chief Prosecutor, Hafaday Chief. And my apologies, I just got word of this press conference just minutes ago, and I entered here today. I missed kind of the timeline and where we're at with the investigation. I did catch the chief saying that his officer involved in this shooting was placed on administrative leave and that the investigation is ongoing. Was there anything else in regards to the timeline that you can share?
All right, I can answer that for you, Nick. Yeah, what I started off a few minutes ago, the shooting occurred at approximately 6 p.m. last night. By 6:20, the chief had already contacted me. I was then able to activate our investigators within about 30 minutes of that time. And then they were on the ground participating in the investigation by 7:45 last night. So it is our first time to use the MOU that we have just still working on, actually. And it seemed so far, we know there's still some bugs to work out, but for the most part, things worked out as anticipated.
While the investigation is ongoing now, or is just fresh in regards to this incident, are your investigators also looking at, or have you also discussed about just the number of officer-related shootings that have been coming out of the Guam Police Department in recent months?
And Nick, we're going to focus on the case that we have before us, and we can talk to Chief about broader discussions at some other time. More than welcome to have that conversation another time.
Okay, so thank you, Attorney General Camacho. So it seems like from here, while we have the investigators ask questions and we look for witnesses to interview and the video as well that we've seen circulating, how long do you believe we might bring a case before a grand jury or just before a court?
Nick, we're very early on in this investigation, so it's very difficult to say. Our chief prosecutor did lay out, we've requested a forensic autopsy to be performed. We are also going to have a ballistic examination performed on the firearm. So once we get all the evidence, then we can make a decision on what the next steps will be.
And I don't know if this would be for you, Chief, to answer, Chief Ignacio. In regards to your officers, I understand they're armed with tasers as well, correct?
Yes, they are. Not every officer, and not we have them out on patrol on duty, but it's not individually assigned.
So how would an officer then determine whether to discharge or use to either use their taser or to use their firearm in the situation like what we saw yesterday?
Again, Nick, it's based on what is presented to the officer at the time that he decides to pull his gun from the holster and discharge his firearm. It's all based on training. It's all based on our general rules and regulations, and it's all also based on law. And that's the thing with the Guam Police Department and its police officers. We are charged, Nick, with that great responsibility, and we are authorized by law, by statute, to use deadly force when necessary. And that is a great responsibility and burden placed on the officers. But the officers took on this job understanding that they have a duty to protect themselves, but more importantly, to protect the public when needed. And the use of deadly force is allowed, again, like I said, by law, when the officers feel that it's in line with law, it's in line with the procedure, and they need to deploy deadly force.
And this officer was on or off duty?
As I stated earlier, the officer was off duty.
Thank you, Nick. We're going to continue on, and if you have more questions, we can come back to you in the next round. So we're circling back to Isaiah again.
My question is, are police becoming more fearful now of being harmed during confrontations with suspects, and are suspects being more aggressive?
I'm sorry, what was the question, Isaiah?
My question is, are police becoming more fearful now of being harmed during confrontations with suspects, and is suspects being more aggressive when officers are approaching them, which is why they pull the trigger?
I don't know that we're more fearful now than in before. I mean, like I said earlier to Nick, we have this great duty and responsibility, and there's a reason why police officers carry firearms. And we are, again, our duties are in line with the law and rules and regulations, and we are, by that virtue, allowed to use deadly force when necessary. Are people more dangerous now than ever? I'm not sure if there's a real specific answer to that. I mean, it's dealt with on a case-by-case basis. I mean, this is an officer-involved shooting, but the circumstances that led up to this, I'm sure, are very different from all the other officer-involved shootings. There are different sets of circumstances, and the officers train, and that's why we shoot, or we qualify annually, and that's why we have briefings, and that's why we have rules, regulations, and laws that guide the officers on when they can deploy force, whether it's deadly force or less than lethal force.
I would like to add, we're seeing more and more cases where people are resisting arrest, and then even more cases of people trying to evade arrest by, trying to run away. That is very dangerous. I please urge people, when you receive an order from a police officer, follow the order. And resisting arrest, it creates a very dangerous situation for both the individual and for the officer. So please, when you receive an order from a police officer, you're supposed to follow that order.
And again, I'm going to add that the reason why we're here today and our office has been engaged is to make sure that the community is going to be confident that when a police officer uses this great responsibility, there's going to be an independent and thorough review to ensure that it did comply with regulations and law.
Thank you, Isaiah. Johnny, you're back up.
Thank you so much, AG Camacho. Thank you, Chief Ignacio. No questions.
Thanks, Johnny. Next, I have PNC Zoom.
Yes, sorry I came in late. Sir, can you give me a brief summary of what happened yesterday, sir?
You know what? We'll send out a very brief summary in writing to those who were unable to join until a little bit later.
Okay, all right. You'll be sending a press release then?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you, AG.
Thank you. Next, we're back to Shane, whose question is concerning the Independent Investigative Team. What kind of procedures will they carry out to begin the investigation? And how does it differ from past investigations?
Well, what we're working on at this time, we have two investigators from the Office of the Attorney General who were at the scene last night that continue to lead the investigation from our office and work with GPD's investigators and Criminal Investigations Department, division. And we'll work together to divide the duties and responsibilities and the angles of the investigation that need to be covered. And then at some point to put it all together, and we'll make a determination of how to proceed from that point.
And this differs from the standard process. Our office traditionally does not get involved this early on in a case. Typically, the Guam Police Department will conduct its investigation, then forward its reports to our office for review and prosecution. So because there are officers involved in this, the agreement has been that our office will be there at the front end. As an example, and as Chief Prosecutor O'Malley mentioned, our investigators responded last night to the scene within about an hour and a half of being notified. So that is not the standard procedure in these types of cases. That's what differs with the IIT.
Thank you, Shane. Next up is Nick.
Hello again. My question is, I guess in regards to the individual that was shot and passed away in this incident. What was he armed? I did hear earlier Polly had questioned about the talks of a machete being used, and that's not going to be discussed at this time. But was he armed with anything? And if so, can you say what that might have been?
Not at this time. Like I said, we're early into the investigation, trying to gather all the facts, and we don't want to release any of the information at this time.
And Chief, can you say where we are, if at all, anywhere in regards to updating the department's use of force policy?
Well, we actually have a meeting. This goes back to IIT. We had gathered with all of our law enforcement, including GPD partners, working with GPD. We actually had scheduled a meeting. We're scheduling a meeting within the next 3 weeks. And at that time, we're going to circulate a draft use of force policy that could be adopted by all law enforcement agencies, which would include GPD. So we're in the process of reviewing and working with GPD to update the use of force policy, and we'll hopefully have something together within the next few weeks. But at the core, it's really about proportionality. And when Chief talks about the use of deadly force, the law provides that you can use deadly force under certain circumstances. So in a situation where an individual is armed and attacking a police officer, that is a situation where an officer would be authorized to use deadly force. The proportionality is always going to be the question in all of these investigations. So factually, we just need to determine whether or not the use of force in this case was proportionate to the threat that the officer faced at that time.
This next question, Basil, is just to continue on with what you mentioned, the statement about seeing more cases of individuals resisting arrest and how dangerous that can be. So my question is, do you believe that is there reason to believe the increase in shootings and violent crimes, it might be tied to the fact that the streets are probably being flooded more with drugs, meth, considering that what we're hearing is cost is down?
What we're reading across the country, and across the country, of course, I'm talking about the United States, is there is an increase in a lot of unrest, whether it's all tied in with drug use is a strong possibility, but a lot of it is just people, I'll call it this, some of it is just the frustration coming out of 2020, year of shutdown, and it's caused a lot of problems, and that's what we don't know what's all triggering the resisting arrest, but that's being addressed not just by us, because I follow with this trend nationwide to try and figure out what's going on.
So that's still under review.
Yes.
Oh, there's no simple answer, Nick. I mean, we're reading more about it, but there could be lots of reasons: unrest, poverty. I mean, so that there's no. If we knew what the silver bullet was to solve crime, I'm sure all of us at this table would want to move forward with it. But every situation is going to be dynamic, and that's what we ask our law enforcement officers to do. GPD officers go out; they don't know what's going to happen when they get out of their vehicle, when they engage in a traffic stop, when they're going to conduct an interview. So that's the environment we live in right now. And again, yes, we have a major drug problem on the island. Is that the sole reason why we have violent crime? I'd say that that's a little bit too simplistic of a perspective to take.
Thank you, Nick. Next is PNC Digital.
No questions
No,
at this point.
I got
Thank
one.
you.
I got one, Jerry.
Okay,
Jerry?
all right.
Yeah. Thank you, sir. Paulie of K57 right now, umbrella of PNC. Is there anyone arrested or in custody at this time, or persons of interest?
For
this
From
case?
last night's shooting?
Yes.
No.
No. Okay. And then the other question, Chief Ignacio, do we have any community outreach campaigns in progress or in the works when you talked about poverty and social issues that we're all dealing with here in Guam? Do we have any current community outreach campaigns? PDN just posted a timeline that this is the 7th time since August 2020 that officers have fired their weapons.
Yes, Polly. So, again, like I said, each officer involved shooting, each time an officer or officers discharge their firearms, there are very, very different sets of circumstances which caused the officer or officers to elect to use their firearm and deadly force. And I'll tell you, every time an officer involved shooting occurs, even if it's not deadly or near deadly or near fatal incident, all those cases are referred to the Attorney General's office for their final review and determination of whether or not they need to file, bring it before a grand jury or determine if any criminal charges need to arise from the incident. So we don't just do our investigations and operate in a vacuum and make our own determination. We still send it forward for an independent review by the Attorney General's office. Basil brought up the point about, these officer-involved shootings. don't just happen because the officers just elect to discharge firearms. There are usually circumstances which lead up to the officers to believe that their lives are in danger. And it's at that point that, the officers feel that they need to use their firearm, or deadly force. And, is it happening because there are drugs involved? Is it happening because they don't want to comply with the officers? That's what we investigate in a case-by-case basis. But, at the end of the day, we do forward those cases up for an independent review. Like the AG said, it can't be that simple that we just say it's all drug related and these guys are resisting because they're all trying to conceal drugs, or they just don't want to go back to jail or whatever. There are many different reasons, and those are what we look for in our investigations. But at the end of the day, like Basil said, the officers are trying to perform their duties. And if you need to pull over and the officers are there with the lights and sirens and you're not complying, and then you try to use your vehicle or whatever other deadly weapon you may have at your disposal against the officers, then the officers have a duty to engage you at that point.
Is that also the policy for off-duty police officers? And if not, actually, if it is or not, can you share us the policy, the official policy for off-duty police officers engaging?
Yes. So Polly, if you look at the law, it doesn't say if you're off duty, you cannot do this. If you're on duty, you can do this. The law doesn't distinguish on when an officer can use deadly force. It only distinguishes when the officer is allowed to use deadly force, and it doesn't distinguish whether you're on or off duty. Officers, by policy, are required to carry their firearm at all times, on or off duty. And there are certain exceptions when they're not allowed to carry their firearms while off duty. But we all carry a firearm, and that's and the inherent part of our duty as police officers.
What's the policy for private citizens engaging in just only to observe and report?
Sure.
I'm sorry, what was the question, Polly?
Private citizens, what does the law say about private citizens engaging in witnessing criminal activity? Is it really only to observe and report, or can there be some kind of lack of a better word, like hold them until a police officer or law enforcement officer shows up?
Well, Polly, so by statute, our law enforcement officers are given, I would say, broader discretion, just recognizing that the jobs that they perform versus a private citizen. But private citizens also can raise self-defense, and self-defense is similar to deadly force in that, or the GPD policies, in that you cannot use deadly force in self-defense unless certain criteria have been met. So whether you're an officer, whether you're a private citizen, in order to use deadly force as a defense to a homicide or assault, you have to establish certain circumstances existed. But I don't want to get into a situation where we're comparing me, Joe Public, out and a police officer who's responding. And again, kudos to chief and all law enforcement. I mean, they may be 8 to 5, but they don't stop being law enforcement once that clock hits 5 o'clock. They understand their responsibility to community, to protect and to serve. And again, that's why GPD's policies do provide a situation when they're there and they see a violent felony being committed potentially and responding.
Thanks for sharing.
Thanks, Polly. Next will be our third and final round. First up will be Isaiah.
Good morning. I have no further questions.
Thank you, Isaiah. Next, we have Sabrina.
Today, I kind of jumped into this press conference a little late. I hope you can hear me. I did want to ask, what was the initial report to police officers in terms of why they responded to the incident? or whatever the incident was. What was the report?
Well, we're still working through that, Sabrina. I believe the initial call was that there was a shooting. So what
Okay.
other information might have been come out? We're in the process of gathering that evidence now.
Who made the report? Was it the off-duty police officer?
Again, we're trying to sort through all that, Sabrina, and hopefully within the next few days, we'll be able to paint a clearer picture factually of the timeline, in addition to what we've provided today.
Wow. The off-duty police officer, was it a duty weapon that was discharged? Was he using a duty weapon when he fired?
We don't know that at this time. The gun was taken into, has been seized as part of the investigation, which is normal procedure. We're still doing additional ballistics examinations of the firearm, but whether it's a personal gun or official firearm, we don't know that at this time.
Okay, this IIT, this task force, who is a part of this task force, and is there any sort of special training that they need to conduct these sorts of investigations?
The procedures that we're using at this point is when GPD notifies us of an officer-involved shooting, we designate investigators. All of our investigators are trained law enforcement officials with years of experience. And yes, they have that training, they have the know-how to conduct an investigation and to assist in an investigation with Guam Police Department's investigators.
So the IIT is just a investigation from the AG's office?
So Bri, I'm not sure if you were there for the first portion of it.
No, I
Our
was not.
office investigators don't traditionally get involved, don't respond to crime scenes. But we've recognized that the need for confidence and transparency and working with GPD, that there are certain situations where we are going to get involved very early on, which is exactly what happened in this case. The investigators that we have assigned to this matter do have homicide training, but they are working with the expertise of the Guam Police Department, for example, their forensics team, their ballistics team, so that we can conduct a thorough investigation.
This off-duty police officer, does he, what was he doing there at this Hemlani commercial building?
That's what we're trying to figure out now, Sabrina. So we'll be able to provide more information once we've completed our interviews and our collection of evidence.
Chief, you mentioned this officer was placed on administrative leave, correct?
Yes, he's been placed on administrative leave, and we've already initiated the internal affairs investigation. I did reach out again, like I said, to Director Ag Paredo for the assistance, so once again, of his internal affairs investigators to work alongside my internal affairs investigators. In addition, I forgot to mention, as part of an officer-involved shooting, we do also deploy our peer support group. And so the officer is being availed of those mental health services, to ensure that, he gets through this along with the peer from the Guam Police Department.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Shamir.
Thank you, Sabrina. Next, we're back to Johnny.
Since you just mentioned about the officers having counseling and that that's made available to them, what about the shooting victims' family? Are you guys making sure they are being kept up to with what's happening in the investigation? At least that.
There's follow-up meetings are being made today with the victim's family. Both for as part of the criminal investigation and to find out how they're dealing, because we understand they have lost a loved one, and that is being addressed today.
And
Thank
Johnny,
you.
to clarify, we do have advocates at our office, and we're aware, and we're working to see how smoothly we can have them contact the family to see if they need services as well.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And Johnny also wanted to add to that. Last night also as well, after I was informed that the person passed away, I did reach out to the Consul General for this community, and expressed to the Consul General, what that the person did pass away, and maybe they can work within their community.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, John.
This is Nancy, Johnny. Next is Shane. Shane's question is regarding the off-duty police officer that was placed on administrative leave. What circumstances pushed the decision to put an officer on administrative leave? And at what point in an investigation would you decide to take them off administrative leave?
Yes, so as is standard in all officer-involved shooting, where their fatality occurs, where death occurs, we place the officer on administrative leave. That's in line with how we conduct our internal affairs investigations. The officer, by personnel rules and regulation, the maximum is 20 days of administrative leave, at which point the officer must return to duty. So he'll be placed on administrative leave for the full 20 days, and he'll be back after that. But the investigations also do continue, both with the IIT and the administrative investigation as well.
Thank you, Shane. Just let me know if you have any follow-ups. Next is Nick Delgado. We're back to you.
Hi, Chief. So you had mentioned that you had spoken to the Consul General for the community that individual, the victim, is from. Can you say specifically what community you're referring to?
No, not at this time.
I'll defer to Basil.
No, at this time, we're keeping all that information as we conduct like I said, this is very early stages of the investigation. We'll leave the specifics out of this discussion at this time.
And you said that you guys have planned to meet with the family of the victim, so there hasn't been contact made just yet. Is that correct?
There has been contact made, but we have advocates here to provide victim services, and that's the piece that we're working through right now.
Has the family said anything about the victim, whether or not he might have had some history of violence, mental disability, or what have you?
We're not going to get into the specific characteristics or any criminal history of the victim at this point. We're going to continue with our investigation, and as soon as we can provide more information, and again, I want to stress, we are conducting an investigation. It's been less than a day since this occurred. As soon as we have information that we can confirm and corroborate, we will provide that to the media and to the public to ensure and to keep you abreast of all major developments in it. But until that time, if there are disputes, it does more harm than good to put information out there that is incorrect, which we're unfortunately seeing already.
Final question I have is for Chief Ignacio. Chief, last week was a very promising moment when we saw the graduation and swearing in of 21 police officers on the force, promising indeed for our island and our community. What's your message to them seeing yet another officer-involved shooting, and those that might have just related this incident to the faith that they have in our force?
Nick, officer-involved shootings should not and do not, as in my opinion, diminish the faith and trust of the community in the Guam Police Department. As I pointed out earlier, officer-involved shootings are the ultimate in the use of force continuum. And I've said this before, officers don't come into work wishing or wanting to use deadly force. That's the least thing that they have in their mind. As a matter of fact, every officer wants to report for duty, have a good, eventful day with the public and the community, serve them well, and then go home to their families. And, it's truly unfortunate that we encountered these situations, but that's what comes with being a police officer, is that we recognize that day in and day out, when they put on that uniform and carry their firearms to work, that that possibility exists. And, like I said, no officer, we don't wish this on any officer, and we don't wish this on anybody in the community. We just have a duty to discharge, and we have, we have that responsibility, that heavy responsibility placed on each and every officer, understanding that at times they may be required to make that split-second decision to use force, which may turn deadly. It's a very great responsibility placed on these officers.
Thank you. Condolences to the victim's family and good luck on the investigation.
Thank you, Nick. Last is PNC or K57. Holly or Jerry?
No more questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody. This concludes our press release. Please look out for our written statement that will send following today's conference.